Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Motorsports on Forever Sports for the Austrian Grand Prix preview. And of course, I'm joined with Reese, and we are together for once in the studio today for the Austrian Grand Prix preview. And yeah, lots could happen this week. It's the sprint weekend, of course, so we will have a sprint on the Saturday. So how the structure of the weekend works is very simple. We will go practice one tomorrow morning, then we will have qualifying. Then that's of course for the race. Then on Saturday we will have the sprint shootout, and then we will have the actual sprint, and then Sunday we will have the race. So that's of course the structure and the schedule for the weekend. But you're in Austria. It's Red Bull Home Grand Prix. Reese has got some stats for us with regards to the actual race itself. And Reese, what can you tell us?
Well, yes, it should be a very interesting race weekend ahead of us. This is going to be the 42nd race held at the Österreich Ring, the Red Bull Ring, known by everyone else. As I said, the 42nd time it has been held here at this circuit, and it was first held in 1963. Certainly a very historic track on our Formula One calendar. Currently, our most wins from drivers is sitting at a tie between Joe Siffert, Alain Prost, and Max Verstappen, with 3 wins between all of those 3 drivers. But the most wins by constructor is Ferrari. Could we see Ferrari making a bit of a turnaround here this weekend? We'll have to wait and see. Our fastest pole position time here that we have had before is a 1 minute 4 second 0.9. So I don't know if we'll be able to see that being beaten this weekend, but it's always possible with these new regulation cars. The race distance here, though, is around 306 kilometers, 190 miles, and there's always around 71 laps that we do have here.
Yeah, and yeah, we're going into this weekend with Red Bulls, of course, the favourites in their home Grand Prix, and they've been favourites for every race this entire season as well. So no surprises there that they're going to the favourites again. However, Sergio Perez might have a little bit of a problem. I mean, we know he's got a problem in the season anyway, but it turns out he's now sick. So what could that possibly mean?
Well, I mean, it could have quite a bad effect on him, of course, in terms of losing points from a race weekend. It also could mean that he just loses a little bit more confidence not being in the car for another race weekend.
Well, that's of course if he doesn't race.
Yes, if he doesn't race, if he isn't able to get well before this race weekend gets underway. Hopefully he will be able to get back in the car. Yeah, we'll have to see what happens tomorrow in free practice 1. And I think it's race qualifying tomorrow, isn't it? Yeah,
race
qualifying tomorrow.
So, I mean, if Sergio Perez is sick, and of course that's not going to help him if he does go into it in a sickly manner in terms of trying to get around the track quickly and getting another restart, as you're supposed to restart a season in Canada, and you'll only be able to restart it, therefore, this weekend. If he's sick, it's not going to help. But if he should actually not be able to race, then what happens for Red Bull? Because we haven't seen that so far this season. What would happen?
No, we haven't seen it happen for any of the teams.
No, I should take that all back. Lance Stroll did not race the first weekend.
That's true. Yes. We had who was it? I think it was Felipe Drugovich.
Yeah.
Filled in for Lance Stroll when he had the broken wrist. But Stroll was still able to participate in the race in Bahrain. He just wasn't able to participate in testing. But if Perez is still unwell and not able to participate in the rest of this race weekend, we're gonna have, I think, possibly Daniel Ricciardo coming into that Red Bull seat. That could really put a lot of pressure on Perez if Danny Rick comes in and really outperforms his, well, not even his teammate.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be a tough ask for Daniel Ricciardo, of course, if he does come in to that Red Bull seat in place of Sergio Perez, should he not be able to recover in time, well, recover enough, of course, to go into the race car. He's not been in a Formula One car, of course, since last season, but he's no stranger to it. Well, I say not been in the Formula One car. He's not been racing.
Well, he's not been in a Red Bull Formula One car. He's been in the sim a lot, though, which has been quite beneficial for the Red Bull team. We don't just have Danny Rick, though, as that backup driver. We do still have Liam Lawson as another backup driver for Red Bull if Danny Rick isn't able to make it this weekend. I don't know if Daniel Ricciardo is doing his Nordschleife run this weekend. I don't know. It might be. But if he is unable to get to the Austrian track, I'm sure they will get Liam Lawson then to fill in that seat. But we'll still have to wait and see what happens with Sergio.
Yeah, I mean, we've got Liam Lawson there and Daniel Ricciardo as the reserve drivers for Red Bull for Sergio Perez this weekend. Both of them coming from down under in Australia and New Zealand, respectively. So they're asking for support from the far ends of the earth. Is that really how far they're going to try and get a
Well,
replacement for Sergio Perez?
Liam Lawson is racing in, I think, Formula 2, so he'll be in Austria anyways, as we do have those support races taking place this
No,
weekend.
I was making a bit of a joke. But yes, we do have, as Reece says, the Formula 3 and the Formula 2 happening this weekend, which you will catch in our live streams as well. We'll be doing timing boards about that as well. So, yeah, don't go anywhere on the channel. We're going to bring you all of the information as much as possible. And, yeah, I've got a very exciting race weekend with lots of racing happening. Now, again, we went back to it. We have a sprint race happening this weekend. And the FIA has today made an F1 sprint rule change. And I'm just going to read the article a little bit. And it says the change gets around an unintended consequence which was introduced at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, of course, our previous sprint. And F1 sprint regulations have again changed ahead of the Austrian Grand Prix in order to overcome issues experienced in Azerbaijan. New rules were introduced ahead of the Baku event that saw Saturday's proceedings separated from the Grand Prix, with a new qualifying shootout introduced to replace what was FP2. In this shootout, which determined the grid for the sprint, drivers had to use medium tyres in SQ1 and SQ2 before using softs in the final stage. But teams were not obliged to save a set of new softs for SQ3 and instead could use up their allocation in the sole practice session and the main qualifying hour on Friday. This was the case for McLaren's Lando Norris and AlphaTauri's Yuki Tsunoda. Though only the Briton made it into SQ3 and had both drivers made the final segment of the shootout, the rules allowed for intermediate tyres to be used in order to start to start 9th rather than 10th. So the rules that have been modified. Race director Niels Wittich's event notes read, in order to avoid the acknowledged unintended consequence whereby in certain situations at sprint events it becomes attractive to run intermediate tyres on the dry track, the following amendment to Article 30.5H of the Formula 1 sporting regulations is made. Consultation has occurred with the commercial rights holders, stewards and teams. The agreement of the FIA, the commercial rights holder, and 9 articles. Oh, this is all very complicated article stuff. Basically, according to the decision, is in the period SQ3 of the sprint shootout, up to 1 set of dry weather tyres may be used, and this must only be a set of the soft specification. So no more medium tyres to be used in SQ3.
Or intermediates.
Or intermediates, indeed.
Yes.
So
I mean, that's quite weird to have drivers using a set of intermediates. I didn't even know that happened in the last qualifying shootout or shootout qualifying that we have, sprint qualifying. Yeah, I didn't even know they did that. That's very weird. And I mean, I don't know why teams would try and use that loophole. I mean, I don't think you'd ever find a gain on intermediate tires during a qualifying
I suppose
session.
the concept is that if you go and use the intermediate tyres in qualifying 3, when you are like a Lando Norris, for example, you stand no chance of beating the other 9 drivers in front of you. You get to savour your own softs for the race, so that's a better thing. So that must probably be the reason why they've done that. And
I guess it does allow the teams to be a bit more equally balanced for the race as well as the sprint, because then they all have the same amount of allocation of tires for the entire weekend. But it's very weird. You always find teams finding these small little loopholes and really taking advantage of them.
Yeah. And speaking of FIA and rule changes and otherwise, Lewis Hamilton's been in the news. He's been calling out certain things. Reece, do you want to read a little bit about the fact that I'm just going to read the name of the article. And it says Lewis Hamilton says the FIA should introduce a new rule on car development amid Red Bull's domination of F1 in 2023. Sounds like someone's a little bit sour.
Well, I did read a little bit about this earlier today, and Hamilton was pretty much saying that he wants teams to be regulated as to when they can start developing their car for the next season. It's very interesting. I mean, quite hypocritical when you've been in a Mercedes that was dominant for 7 years, because they started developing their car earlier than any other team had before the turbo hybrid regulations came to be. Mercedes was that test mule for those new regulations, as Williams was the new test mule for these new regulations. I mean, can you be saying stuff like this when you know you've taken advantage to...
Yeah, but it no longer
exactly
suits them. So it no longer suits the team. So now they're seeing other people take advantage of something they're used to, and they're unable to take advantage of it. So I suppose that's the argument. To be fair, take away where he might have been. I could probably agree and say the problem is that, for example, like Ferrari have basically given up on this season, and a lot of their development ideas are going straight towards next season. They're going straight.
Well,
Well, we don't.
yes.
Well, now we're going to develop this car, and you're going. Well, you still got another 13 races to go in this season.
It's Formula One. They know they've lost already this year. There's no point fighting for the championship, wasting very valuable resources in a budget cap era. I mean, they're already relatively regulated as to how much work they can do with the budget cap. So, I mean, what's the point in putting a date on it? Because there is only so much you can do with the certain amount of money that you have. So, you're already being super regulated in that sense. So, yeah, I mean, it's a bit pointless. I understand why he wants it, but at the same time, I mean, how are you going to regulate that as well? How are you going to monitor that teams aren't doing any designs in CAD or in any other design software? Or how are you going to regulate it with Adrian Newey, who draws everything? You're not going to go and take away his drawing board and his pencil and go, no, Adrian, you can't start designing
can't
your
do
car
that yet.
until the 5th of December.
Yes.
No,
No,
I
it's
think
going to be difficult.
very difficult to judge.
Yeah.
Or
And
police.
that's one of the pieces of news there. But the big news that has also been released this week, and that is while speaking about Red Bull taking advantage of things, is the fact that Red Bull's overall structures will be changing from 2024. And that is the fact that AlphaTauri, which is of course their development team in the Formula One,
Formerly Toro Rosso.
yes, formerly Toro Rosso. I'll get there eventually. Sorry.
And before that, I think it was Minardi.
Minardi, yes. They will be yet again changing their name and their whole setup. So the AlphaTauri team will be renamed for the 2024 season. Helmut Marko has confirmed with the junior team to follow Red Bull Racing as far as the regulations allow. So that's the one major piece of news there. The fact that, and of course that's following on the news that we've got that High Tech will be getting involved in Formula One. I mean, not that that's going to necessarily...
We haven't had a confirmation yet that they are going to be joining forces for AlphaTauri, but we are speculating that at the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, Red Bull and High Tech are quite involved in the junior formulas, so you could see that relationship coming over to Formula One. Certainly a great prospect for Red Bull. Of course, they want to have another team, or they want to have a partnership with a team for their new engines that they are going to start manufacturing. So that could be where AlphaTauri comes, or High Tech comes into play.
Yeah.
Because I think Red Bull are starting to look at moving away from the sister team, starting to look at maybe offloading it, because I mean, it does cost them a lot of money.
Yeah, I suppose, of course, their sister team AlphaTauri has been their little... You guys go try something, and then we'll base our own development off of that as a result. So it's quite beneficial for teams to have those smaller teams underneath them. Mercedes has Williams, and you've got Red Bull with AlphaTauri, of course. So
I think the biggest benefit, though, for teams is to put their junior drivers in. That's certainly where, if Red Bull did have to step away from AlphaTauri, or High Tech as it could be named, it could be a bit of a disappointment for them, because they don't have that place to put those junior drivers and give them a seat in Formula One. And it does just open them up to the risk of having a lot more of their drivers being poached by other teams.
Yeah. So that's our speculation, at least. There's no coincidence, I don't think, that High Tech go and announce they're going to be joining Formula One. And then in the same week, AlphaTauri announces they're going to be having a name change and a restructuring from 2024 onwards. So one assumes it's going to be building up towards High Tech taking over that team there. But yeah, that's big news, though, because, of course, that's Yuki Tsunoda and... Nick de Vries. I say Nick de Vries as if that's going to affect him too much. I think he's got bigger things to worry about right now in his future. But
massively, yeah.
They've got to worry about what's going to be happening with their team, because restructuring can be many things, of course. So that's the one piece of news there that's relatively significant. Reese, you've got some more?
Yes, well, I've got an article here just saying, this is from the Mirror, saying Mercedes to spring Lewis Hamilton's surprise at Austrian Grand Prix in a warning to Max Verstappen.
Oh, I wish.
Whether we can take that with a grain of salt, I think so. People are just saying, at a circuit which bears the name and boasting a 100% record so far in 2023, Red Bull will certainly be wanting to take the win again here at their home circuit, the Red Bull Ring. But not everyone thinks that the Austrian Grand Prix will be another procession for Max Verstappen. Red Bull have won every race so far this season. More than that, they have generally done so with ease. The RB19 has been well ahead of the rest of the grid. At the same time, that can't be said for Verstappen's teammate Sergio Perez, who's been struggling to keep up with him for the past few races. But going back on to Lewis Hamilton, just trying to find where they actually speak about him, because they're waffling a little bit here. just saying Austria could be an exciting race because the teams are getting more competitive and balanced. If it rains, a lot of things can change. We could have a surprise from Mercedes because it looks like Lewis is coming back. Lewis certainly does seem like he is getting a bit more comfortable with his car. He seems a lot more happy with these new upgrades. Cars looking a lot more competitive as well. They're still quite far off of Red Bull in the dry, but as Toto Wolff said, I mean, or the representative from Mercedes said, it could throw a bit of a span in the works with the rain because rain is predicted the entire weekend, Mark.
Yeah, and I mean, rain, of course, we saw in Canada what it can do with regards to rain and qualifying and otherwise. We saw some ridiculous things there, and unfortunately, you've closed the article. I was going to read one small thing from it, but it's fine. But, and somebody's going and saying not only is, of course, the rain going to throw a span in the works, the fact that Mercedes and Toto Wolff have announced that they're bringing more upgrades to the car that's already been significantly upgraded to the point where suddenly it's become a lot more competitive. They're bringing even more upgrades and major upgrades, they say, to both Austria and Silverstone, of course, next week. So Mercedes could be a much more competitive team, and perhaps Red Bull do really need to wash their backs, because not only that, you speak about another team, Aston Martin, who thought they had a brakes issue with Alonso in Canada, and as a result, he dropped off of Verstappen, even though Alonso asked, I reckon I can win this race, and then they said, no, you have to continue to lift and coast. They discovered afterwards, of course, the brake issue wasn't there at all. So who knows how close that Aston Martin and the Red Bull could have actually got in Canada. It could have been a very, very interesting race there. And if that's saying the pace of Aston Martin is actually a hell of a lot closer to Red Bull than we thought, and now Mercedes is bringing upgrades.
Same engine.
It could be a very, very close Austria Grand Prix. And for all that it's in their home backyard, of course, Red Bull, this is the Red Bull circuit. They might actually have probably the biggest fight of the whole season at home, where they thought it might be easiest.
I mean, it will make it great for us to watch. But yeah, speaking of upgrades, though, coming to teams, you did say Mercedes has teased a bit of an upgrade coming towards this race weekend. Lando Norris and McLaren, I almost said Mercedes there. McLaren are bringing some upgrades, but only for one of the cars. So Lando Norris will be the only driver receiving upgrades for his McLaren car this race weekend, as they are splitting the upgrades between now and the Silverstone Grand Prix to see whether they work, of course, as well as it's part of the cost cap. It's just so expensive to bring and expedite upgrades towards races. So they've been able to finish one of the car's upgrades for this race weekend, and they weren't able to finish Oscars, so they're going to be bringing that next weekend. Hopefully they will bring some big gains, though, for the McLaren. They seem to be very, very fast in qualifying. That's certainly been a very big surprise.
Their qualifying time has significantly increased since the beginning of the season. The problem is their race pace and their race strategy still seems to let them down on a consistent basis. But they're not as doom and gloom as they used to be, but they're still so far off where they probably should be.
Yes, I mean, they are still very far off of where we would expect them to be. Just a bit of an explanation here from McLaren, just saying the Austria split in upgrades, bringing the upgrades, is so that McLaren can have a major part of the upgrade plus spares available this weekend. As the Austrian Grand Prix is a sprint weekend, parc fermé restrictions set in much earlier. Any change to the specifications from qualifying onwards would mean pit lane starts for both the sprint race on Saturday and Sunday's Grand Prix. If McLaren split the parts that are available across the two cars, it would risk an extremely costly penalty should anything get damaged. So, I mean, it makes sense for the McLarens to split that strategy, or to split those upgrades between the two cars, just to mitigate risk a little bit more than anything else. But we'll have to wait and see if these upgrades do bring a lot more potential to that McLaren suit.
Yeah, and the last bit of upgrades for a team we've not talked about, and again, every week we go, and the team we haven't really talked about because everyone just seems to somehow forget about them because of how dreadful they've been, and that is the most historic team, the most talked about supposedly team in Formula One,
winning team at the Austrian Grand Prix.
Well, at almost every Grand Prix they've got the most wins, because it is of course Ferrari, and but they're also bringing upgrades this weekend. Problem is that we've seen this before from Ferrari, so we're going, don't think it's going to do much. But anyway, Sainz has thanked his Ferrari workforce, well, not his Ferrari workforce, but rather the Ferrari workforce, for the incredible effort, in quotes, of course, by Sainz, to bring updates to Austria, as Leclerc notes, steps in the right direction. Well, that's hard to
That's
come by
probably
for Ferrari. So I've got an article here, and it's from the Formula One site here. It says Carlos Sainz has said that he cannot thank enough the Ferrari employees who worked around the clock to get upgrades in place for this week's Austrian Grand Prix as the team looks to make gains on their rivals. Ferrari set fourth in the Constructors' Championships, of course, behind Red Bull, Mercedes, and Aston Martin, who we've all talked about, after a mixed start in the 2023 campaign. Mixed is putting it lightly, with science
grateful is the way I'd put it.
with science highlighting high
High
tire
tire
degradation.
That one.
So sorry,
I'm not
tongue
even reading the
twisted,
article and know
and
what
a
you said.
lack of performance in high-speed corners as the SF23's main issues. However, there were signs of the tyres front last time out in Canada, where the Ferrari drivers bounced back from a challenging qualifying session to claim a solid haul of points in P4 and P5. Not a bad race for them at all. Still wasn't quite challenging anywhere near the top. They were far off, but a much better bit of strategy for once as well. In Austria, their efforts are set to be bolstered by a batch of developments that science hopes will yield another step in the right direction for the famous Italian marquee team. The team back in Maranello have done an incredible effort to bring them forward to this race, he said, paying tribute to their hard work. I cannot thank them enough for all the people back there, for the extra hours that everyone has put in for these parts to arrive. It's been a huge effort by everyone, and from here I want to congratulate them and tell them that we are going to do our best to make them work well, and hopefully they are all worth it and can be competitive this weekend. Now, the upgrades that they've brought, we don't actually know. They haven't specified, so
we're still also waiting for any pictures and leaked. Well, I've seen a few wings today on Twitter, but that's about it. It does look like people are bringing quite high downforce wings. Alpine and Aston Martin seem to have wings that are very similar. Red Bull with their high downforce wing that they've had most of the season, though. Interesting though to look at some of the different design changes. McLaren have changed the profile of their side pods. Sorry, we are moving away from Ferrari again. Once, as per usual. But yeah, McLaren's upgrades seem to be very, very familiar with the likes of Mercedes and Aston Martin. It's a bit of a split between those two teams. It's got very Aston Martin-esque side pods, but also the Mercedes-esque cutouts or dugouts in those side pods as well. It's interesting to see how other teams are starting to kind of see where the best setup is, and they're all starting to go in a very similar direction at the moment with their designs.
So lots of upgrades, of course, coming for Austria from all the big teams, and some of those upgrades will continue on into Silverstone next week. But otherwise, guys, that is the Austrian Grand Prix preview. It's going to be a very, very exciting race weekend. Of course, you can join us here on Forever Motorsports, on Forever Sports Live for all of the sessions. Me and Reese will take you through those. Of course, the sprint race weekend, so an even more exciting weekend, so don't go anywhere. And of course, whilst we leave you here, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on all notifications, comment down below what you think is going to happen in the race, and we will of course see you this weekend. Reese, any final thoughts?
Well, just before we do get started in this race weekend, I'm going to ask for your predictions.
Oh dear. Predictions, here we go.
So you've got 4 sets of predictions for me this weekend.
I've got how many? 4 sets of predictions. Okay, we're going. Qualifying.
Sprint qualifying.
Oh, okay.
Sprint and race.
Cannot keep the qualifying the same as the sprint qualifying.
No.
Okay. Qualifying itself, because it's a short thing, it's going to test the drivers that have been there a little bit more.
Well, it's a normal standard.
No, I'm just saying, but they've only had one practice session.
One session.
So I'm going to go Max Verstappen 1, I'm going to go Fernando Alonso 2, and I'm going to go Lewis Hamilton 3. Then for the qualifying for the sprint shootout, I'm going to say Max Verstappen 1, Fernando Alonso 2, Charles Leclerc 3, just because I reckon Ferrari will somehow do something there. In the shootout itself, I'm going to say Max Verstappen 1, I'm going to say Fernando Alonso 2, and I'm going to say it's Ferrari, they'll probably crash. George Russell in 3.
Interesting.
And then I'm going to say for the race itself,
Max
Verstappen 1, Fernando Alonso 2, and Lewis Hamilton 3.
Okay.
Your predictions, same thing. Go
Pretty
quick.
much very similar. So I'm going to say qualifying 1, Max Verstappen 1, Fernando Alonso 2nd, and Carlos Sainz 3rd.
Okay.
Then sprint qualifying will be Max Verstappen number 1. I'm going to say also Fernando Alonso 2nd, and then maybe Hamilton 3rd, because they're going to need a little bit of time to get to the bottom of their new upgrades. Then sprint, I'm going to say Max Verstappen winning the race. Maybe Lewis Hamilton taking 2nd.
So Fernando Alonso doesn't hold on to it.
And Alonso in 3rd. And then I think Alonso's and the Aston Martins are going to be a bit stronger in the race than the sprint, because Mercedes seems to be struggling still a little bit with degradation. So I'm going to say Verstappen first, um, Alonso second, then Perez third if he does come to this race weekend.
I'm sure he probably will do. But otherwise, yes, we could see a potential new driver on the grid. Well, that's not new, but a different driver
yes.
on the grid for Austria. But guys, otherwise, thank you so much for watching Forever Motorsports on Forever Sports. I've been Mark, Reese has been Reese, and we, of course, will check you in the race weekend as it comes. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.